Well, good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. President Trump has easily logged more miles flying around the globe than any president since Air Force One first took flight, settling wars, making deals, and trying to show the world that democracy works much better than any other option. And just 10 months into the job, he's created what looks like a far more effective way of finding peace by partnering with other world leaders who have the same goals. The best example has been the Middle East, where he built a consortium that effectively surrounded Hamas with no other choice than to put their weapons down and return the hostages. Now he's trying to do the same with NATO partners to show Russia that it cannot take over Ukraine. But can it work with the stubborn and often dishonest Vladimir Putin? Well, our guest tonight is a wise man and a good friend, Captain Chuck Nash. Welcome back, Captain.
A pleasure to be with you, Pastor.
Let's start with Putin, who's proved to be the most challenging for President Trump to negotiate with. He comes to meetings, he smiles a lot, he says the right things, and even wrote back to the First Lady when she was asking for the release of Ukrainian children who'd been captured in the war. But at the same time, he's sending hundreds of drones to attack inside Ukraine, 500 of them in just one day. What will it take to stop him?
Well, I think we might be getting close to that point finally. We talked about it the last time we were together, and that is the pressure that is being put on the oil and energy industry inside of Russia, which accounts for the majority of their income. The winter coming up, the frozen pipelines, and then you add on the absolute destruction that the Ukrainians are wreaking on their energy infrastructure inside Russia. There are about 60 major oil and refining installations in Western Russia, and the Ukrainians have hit every one of them at least once.
Wow.
And they are now building, the Ukrainians now have the domestic capability to build missiles that can go 1,800 miles, which reach deep into Russia and get a lot of the other refining and pumping stations. So everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people poo-pooed President Trump when he said, well, we're going to put sanctions on Russian oil. It's working. The Indians and the Chinese, their major refineries, have stopped all deliveries as of December, and that's when the grace period ends. So if you look at what the Russian industry has to do to sell their oil illicitly, they have to go down to $36 a barrel. That's a 40% discount off of our standard pricing. So they're hurting. It's going to take money from them. And to make up for it, to pay the war, he's going to have to raise taxes, which when you take the mile-long gas lines that are already inside places in Russia, you add on the tax burden and you throw on a Russian winter. I think it's time for him to come to the table. And Steve Witkoff and Putin's negotiators, I think, are coming to that conclusion.
You know, President Trump has been smart about using the carrot and stick approach with Putin, trying to cut off their oil sales while arming Ukraine with some of our best weapons. He also told Putin that he may be able to push Zelensky to give up some of the territory he wants. Do you think that strategy could work?
Well, again, it doesn't take a seer to see what is going to have to happen. And we've talked about this before. Ukraine is going to have to give up territory. That is just the way it is. And the Ukrainians don't want to hear that. Now, Axios is reporting that there's a 28-point peace plan that the United States and the Russians have been working on. And we've got the Secretary of the Army, the Chief of Staff of the Army, and some other high delegation people in Kyiv right now talking with Zelensky and his people. And inside that 28-point plan, supposedly, it's for Zelensky to give up portions of the Donbass that the Russians have and that the Ukrainians currently hold, to cut the armed forces by 50%, abandon certain categories of weaponry, including the long-range missiles that the United States and Western allies have been providing, a rollback in U.S. military assistance, no foreign troops on Ukrainian soil, and Russian as an official state language in Ukraine. So those are just some of the points. And of course, the Ukrainians will buck at the majority of those. We'll see what our NATO allies and European allies do with that. But I think it gets to the point where President Trump holds the cards. And what he can tell the Western allies is, look, we're going to put together something that we think is common sense that gets this war stopped. If you fight us on this, fine. It's on you. We're out.
Well, you mentioned Steve Witkoff a moment ago. President Trump has been using his old friend and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, on these peace missions, holding out the idea that good business opportunities could come with peace. You think that's a better way to get to the goal rather than just using strictly military options?
I think economic and military, they're all part of the same thing. It's all part of foreign policy, which is why the president needs the authority to impose sanctions and to impose tariffs. It's diplomatic, economic, and military. Those are the three legs of the stool in foreign policy. So yes, I really do think that perhaps a realistic approach to foreign policy is long overdue.
Well, one more question about Putin. While he's been pushing back on President Trump, he's also spent time posing for photographs with his nuclear arsenal. I'd like to think it's his awkward way of creating social media threats. But do you think he's brazen enough to use a nuclear weapon if he finds his back against the wall?
No, I don't. And if he did, I don't think the Russian military would carry it out, quite frankly. When you see where this thing has gone, and it has been an absolute meat grinder, and the Russians have been just decimating a generation of young men, and for very, very little strategic gain. If they can hold the Donbass and the Crimea, Putin would be happy with that. The Ukrainians won't, but to stop the slaughter, that may be what is going to have to be negotiated, and I think that's where it's going.
This seems like a tremendous loss of life when we're arguing about a border and its movement matter a bit one way or the other. Do you think common sense is going to prevail soon?
It has to. It has to. It's too much blood and treasure has been wasted on some muddy fields. And yeah, I get it. There are a lot of natural resources in the Donbass, which is why the Russians want it, and because of the ethnic Russian speaking people in the Donbass region. I get all that. The land bridge to the Crimea. Yes, that's all important to the Russians. But the loss of life and the continued destruction on both sides, it's got to come to an end.
Well, Chuck, we need to take a short break. Can you stay for another segment?
I certainly can.
Well, for those of you watching, I'd like to suggest using this time to log on to ajnow.com. You can share your thoughts on the foreign policy issues we're discussing. We'll be right back. We're back now with the very accomplished Navy Captain, Chuck Nash. Let's move to the Caribbean, where U.S. ships are standing by off of the coast of Venezuela and not far from Colombia. While the president is trying to stop drugs from coming into the United States, the liberal media is doing whatever it can to make the president look bad. Rather than getting credit for doing something effective in the war on drugs, this veteran NBC reporter was siding with the fishermen. Listen to this.
The U.S. military strikes on boats allegedly carrying drugs heading for the United States is having a chilling effect on fishermen here in Colombia. Normally, these boats go far out to sea to find their catch. But now fishermen tell us they're too afraid, worried that if they go far from the shore, they could be hit by a U.S. drone.
These are multinational organizations that they're not going to stop. They're going to continue to try to not only smuggle illicit narcotics into the United States, but they're a criminal enterprise. There's a coordinated strategy here by the Trump team that is the right strategy to try to reduce this threat to Americans.
Chuck, you probably noticed how the reporter said allegedly carrying drugs, as if any fisherman would have 3 200-horsepower engines on the transom. I'm assuming that your Navy colleagues know the difference between a little fishing boat and drug runners. Am I correct?
Absolutely, you are correct. And some of those, quote, fishing boats that I've seen, fishing boats, they don't go out with square packages, all the way up to the gunnels. And, like you say, the big outboards in the back pushing 40, 50 miles an hour in open ocean. No. Those are drug smugglers, and they're moving their product to staging areas for further infiltration into the United States. So the intelligence is good on this. Secretary Rubio has been the point man on this, pointing out that we have more than ample intelligence to know exactly what's on those boats. And I'm sure that he would not be that far out ahead of his skis if he didn't know that for a fact.
Well, another troubled part of the globe I'd like to discuss is Africa, where Christians are being sought out and slaughtered in significant numbers. President Trump has told the Nigerian leadership that he'll send in U.S. forces to wipe out the terrorists if they don't do something about it. How do you see this playing out?
I think there's a role here for the United States. This is, again, just an absolute tragic loss of life. There have been probably 100,000 Christians wiped out in Nigeria. And then you look at what's been going on in southern Sudan and elsewhere. Again, that has to come to an end. Everybody was talking about Gaza. Well, if you look at what's happened in Nigeria, that is true ethnic cleansing. That's exactly what's going on there. You have an Islamic group trying to wipe out all of the Christians in that country. So yes, pleas have been made to the president to look and see what the United States role could be, and I am sure that we are looking at it at all levels of our government.
I understand that the Saudi Crown Prince was asking the president to pay attention to Sudan and see if there was something that could be done there. Do you think that's on the agenda as well?
I do. That whole area of Africa, it has been in turmoil, and you can look all the way to the east in Somalia, and then just work your way west through Libya. Libya is a Somalia with oil. So it's just, the whole place is a mess. And that drives the immigration into Europe, which has caused so many problems. And you've got cultures in Europe, the Italians, in Denmark, in the Netherlands, their cultures are at risk because they have been overloaded by people from mostly the Maghreb, from the Northern Africa, who have come in, and they in such vast numbers that they have been unable or unwilling to assimilate. And so now you have these divided, what used to be monolithic cultures of these European countries, and they're all divided now. So peace has to come to that area if we're ever to get relief in the other areas.
Does the U.S. have any allies in or around Africa that could be mobilized to help so that U.S. troops don't have to go in and fight the terrorists?
We do, but those are, how's the best way to describe this? Transactional. Something has to be good for you, good for me, and it has to be in relatively short period of time. Those relationships are ones where you have to rent them. They're not really long-term. I would say probably the best allies that we have are not in the countries that are in question. They're in countries like Egypt, possibly Tunisia. Yes, those are, I would say, more able to deal with than certainly Sudan or Nigeria.
Well, one last question. I'm curious about your opinion. Secretary Hegseth called an unprecedented number of military leaders to Washington to try to establish, I think, a way forward where they could be unified. Do you have an opinion on how effective that will be and what the impact of something like that will be longer term?
Well, I think it'll be effective because it's not one of those things where if he had gone out to each theater individually and had a talk, the leaders could have said, well, that's not what I heard when he came here. No, they were all in the room. They all heard the same thing. And it was an open invitation to participate in the new War Department and to readjust the culture, to go back to our warfighting ethos, and to really rejuvenate for the American future, the golden American future. So the other side of that was, and if you can't, there's the door. I have not heard of any 4-star or 3 stars resigning recently. Now, I do know that the 4-star Navy Admiral in Southern Command is retiring, but that's the only one that I've heard. So I think everybody is on board.
Well, Chuck Nash, thank you for sharing your wisdom on these important global issues today. Veterans Day just passed recently, and I'd like to thank you for your very successful service on our behalf. We'll have you back again soon.
My pleasure. You're too kind, Pastor. Thank you.
Well, in a moment, my thoughts on the hope that does exist. I'll be right back. The Ukraine war, started by Putin, has caused millions of people to endure tremendous suffering and death. Ballistic missiles the size of telephone poles have struck apartment buildings in Ukraine, where only women and children have lived. Entire cities have been leveled to rubble. You know, here in the United States, we think about war differently. It's almost as if it were like a video game. It doesn't seem real to us. Well, consider this. According to the United Nations, about 13% of Ukraine's total housing inventory has been damaged or destroyed. It's affected more than 2.5 million households. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has forced 10 million Ukrainians to flee their homes, with over 3 million displaced within the country and 7 million Ukrainians displaced abroad. So many deaths on the battlefield on both sides. This war is Russia's deadliest conflict since World War II. You know, there's not a solution that's going to make everybody happy, but the bloodshed and the warfare, they simply have to stop. You don't have to look very far through human history to find leaders who, when they managed to consolidate power, behaved in a beastly way. When communism came to the Russian people, tens of millions of people died. Lenin and Stalin butchered, terrorized. People were murdered in the name of giving something to the people. And what they actually gave to the people was a reign of oppression. Communism is not just another economic system. It's one of the most destructive, murderous expressions of human authority in history. And the people who advocate for socialism and communism today in our nation, in our biggest cities, they have to deny history to do so, and it's only our profound ignorance that gives them a place in the public square. You know, it's easy for us as Christians to be tempted to willfully not notice. It's just simpler to do a Bible study than it is to try to engage the world we live in with biblical truth. I don't believe we have that luxury any longer. We have to tell the truth, stand up for the truth, and live it out. If we'll do that, there's reason for hope. We'll be right back with your emails. Thank you for spending a few minutes of your day with us. It is an honor. Your emails make a big difference. Terry from Sun City Center, Florida emailed, why can't the news just concentrate on giving us, as Sergeant Friday used to say, just the facts? We don't want their opinion or editorializing. We have brains, and with the facts, we can come to our own opinions. Well, Terry, I don't disagree, but the world we're living in now seems that our information comes filled with opinions. So we're going to have to use our brains and sort through it. Wishing it weren't that way isn't going to change it. We've got to pay a bit more attention, work a bit harder, but there is still news and information available to us. Dominic from Illinois wrote, those on the left are trying to brainwash people, mostly through media and the news, to hate Trump and everything on the right. Almost exactly how some make very young children hate everything Jewish. Let's love the hate out of them. Well, Dominic, I like the approach. Jesus warned us in Matthew 24 that the wickedness would grow to the point that the love of most would grow cold, and the Greek word there is the God's love, so it's the people of faith. We got to guard our hearts. I agree with you. We can't let hate take over. And finally, Marilyn from Conway, South Carolina. I'm struggling with discerning the conflicting facts and evidence between the Bible and science. I saw a segment about the woolly mammoth, which they say existed 40,000 years ago. We were taught in school about dinosaurs billions of years ago. Doesn't the Bible say that God's creations were about 7,000 years ago? When I challenge this, I get nowhere. How can science be that much off? Well, the debate seems to rage between a young Earth and an old Earth. Lots of facts, lots of opinions. One idea that helps me a bit, I think in Genesis, we have an account beyond just original creation. When God begins to bring order to this world, it says it was chaotic, and God began to speak order into this world. I think there's part of the story that we don't have the full picture on. Maybe that helps a bit. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us today. God bless you, and I pray you have a good evening.